everyone, welcome back to my channel Gabbabetic and welcome to today's video. I hope you've been enjoying my Dexcom G7 videos so far, and today I thought it would only be right to do a Dexcom G6 versus Dexcom G7 video, show you all the tips and tricks, the differences between the two and what I think is better really. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do, please give it a big thumbs up, comment down below and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Thanks so much for watching and let's get started. First of all, we're going to have a look at the design of the two systems, and obviously you can tell from the get-go, the G6, way more things going on here than the G7. So we have 3 inside this box, there's 1 inside here. When I got it from the pharmacy, you actually get 3 small boxes. So honestly, it's only going to take up about this much compared to the G6. And as far as I'm aware, there's no big applicator like this anymore. It doesn't look like this. As you can see, it's going to look something like that. And there also is no transmitter, which is probably the biggest thing. So let's go ahead and unbox the two and compare them then. First of all, open up my G7 and have a look at it. We're going to go ahead, open it up. So taking out the G7, we can see that that is all is in there. So it is much smaller in comparison. And it actually looks like the Libre applicator. That's all that's in the box. The applicator, which I'm assuming has a sensor and some instructions. We have our G7 applicator, which is looking very small. Let's get out our G6 and have a closer look. They are a lot different. So everything is inside here, everything is inside here. I don't know what's the story with codes yet. We'll have a look in a second and see if there's a code in here. But the applicators are very different. This is very much looking like the Libre, and this is the classic Dexcom G6 with the code for pairing on there. We will have a closer look at the sensor itself when it's on, but for now that's how the two applicators look. You have to break this off to get it ready. You've probably seen a G6 video before. If you haven't, you can look at some of the ones I filmed, and we're going to open this up. So let's get going. Here's our applicator for the G7. So unscrew the cap. Okay, so there is our sensor in there, and there's the needle, as you can see that in there. So that is the first part done. Unscrew the cap. In contrast, let's put our G7 to the side, get our G6 open up. So our G6 is in this applicator here, and we have our pairing code that we will put. Well, I use the receiver for mine. You can use your phone if you want. So we're going to peel these off of application, take that off, put it on. So you can see a very different style. This is definitely more like Freestyle Libre. This is very different altogether. So the design has definitely changed. You can actually see the needle inside the G7 there, if I get the right angle. Can't see it yet in the G6, so maybe a pro for the G6 is that if you don't like needles, you don't actually have to look at it right away. So let's go ahead and compare the application process. I am going to do both on the receivers, just so you know. Quick look at both receivers. I'm going to do a future video about all this. Immediately you can see the G7 receiver is much smaller, much thinner. I'm going into a video about that in the future, about the differences and any advantages or disadvantages. But I just wanted to show you that I will be using the receivers for both. Let's start with our G7 application. So for doing both the G6 and G7 application, I just had a G6 on there and it's very raw, and the G6 takes up a lot of room. I think you'll see that in a minute. So if I can, I'll try to fit them both on the same arm, but we'll start with the G7 first. Let's go ahead and put on our G7 sensor. This is the safety guard. This has to be pushed all the way in. Push that in. Oh my god, whoa. I was not ready for that. Ah, that felt weird. That felt weird. Oh my god, it feels so small. I can't. So that's what remains of the G7 applicator after activation, and the code is now here. So we need to pair our sensor. The G6, you go around it, but wow, it's so much smaller in comparison. It's amazing. So let's finish our G7 activation process, and then we can put on our G6. But for now, it is feeling very small. I have to go have a look in the mirror. But do remember, this has to be pushed all the way in. That I did not know for the first time, so that was difficult to figure out because it didn't actually say it on the instructions. So maybe a bit of a disadvantage of the G7. Looking at our receiver, and it says make sure you have inserted it, which I did, so press that. Find the pairing code, which is 6659. So 6, 6, 5, and 9. Grand. So it's searching now for the sensor. Always keep this in 6 meters, just as before. Hopefully it will find it soon. Perfect, pairing complete. So I press finish. So what's this? Your sensor is warming up. It's only 25 minutes. Oh my god, that is so different. So you'll see in a minute when we do the G6, this is a huge difference. The G6 is a 2-hour warm-up. This is 25 minutes. That is crazy. Sensor's on, it's warming up for 25 minutes, which is great. All you're left is this, so you can just dispose of that and recycle where you can, the box and stuff. So let's get our G6 application ready. So on our receiver, we say new sensor. That's different, first of all, because you put the code in the G7 after you put it on. For the G6, you definitely put it on before. So we've got 5, 9, 5, 1 today, which is correct. So that is successful. So now put on the sensor, then the transmitter. Transmitter is the main difference. As you can see, there was no transmitter things at all with the G7. For the G6, there is. So let's get this ready. Peel these off. You can't see any needle there. That's like I was saying, that's why the G6 might be better. And I always pull this off before, and now it's ready to go on. I think I will do the same arm. I'm just gonna line it up further down than the G7 so they're not on top of each other. They may be a bit more on top of each other than I thought, but sure. Here we go. That was sore. So smooth. There is a tiny millimeter gap between them. Don't know if you can see that. We smooth that down. We put on our transmitter from our last sensor. Here it is from the one I had on before. So you break this part. Transmitter is such an ordeal, and in Ireland you had to get the transmitter sent to you directly from Dexcom, which meant you had to get funding by the HSE, which is the health service executive in Ireland, kind of like the NHS. So you couldn't just go to the pharmacy and get your G6, but now you can for the G7, so it makes life a lot easier because you don't need this funding that needs to be approved. That's the two of them together. So obviously you can see there's a huge size comparison. So let's go ahead and activate our G6. So on here, I just say start sensor, and it starts it up like that. 2-hour warm up. So later I'll do an overview of advantages and disadvantages of each. Obviously there's a huge difference between 25-minute warm up and a 2-hour warm up where you have access to no readings and you have to use your finger prick. That is very long. So as you can see with the sensor application process, it's different. One's more like a Libra, one has the transmitter. The transmitter makes things just a bit more bulky, bit awkward if you're in Ireland, and it changes the way you have to order things. And also the warm-up is extremely long for the G6. 2 hours is very long, whereas the G7 only half an hour. So that is the application process for both. Once they are both up and running, I'll be keeping you updated for the next 2 days of how the readings look in comparison, and we might compare it to blood sugar meters as well. I'll see how things are going, how things are looking. Sometimes I find with the G6 that it does take a while to get accurate, so we'll see if the G7 is like that too, but I'll keep you posted. So the next thing I'll be doing is accuracy for day 1 and day 2. And then I'll be doing a comparison of the two, which has the better advantages, which has worse, and my opinion of which is the better system. So I'll catch up with you in a while. So the G7 has paired after half an hour. 5.2 and going a bit down, so I'm going to have some food. The G6 still has like an hour and a half to go, so we will just be using the G7 for now, and then we will start our comparison when it's ready. Dexcom G6 has just finished its warm-up. It's been 2 hours, and immediately it is saying I'm going low, and 7.5 is what it's saying on the G7. And this is the issue that I've had before with the G6, where when it starts off it's like really inaccurate, because as you can see that is a huge difference. So I will in this case do a real blood sugar to check, because I don't feel low anyway. I think I am more this is really off. Let's just confirm. So let's do the blood sugar to check. So the real blood sugar is 5.8, so I'm definitely not low. Like this is saying 3.8, that's way off, but you know, this is reading 7.5, so slightly higher as well. So they are both a little bit off. This is way off at the moment, so hopefully they will even out the more that they kind of settle down, and we will have some real accurate blood sugar. So I'd say I'm about 6 at the moment, so G7 is closer because I'm definitely not low and I'm not treating a low. So I'm going to go out for food. That's why I am dressed up. So we'll see when I'm having food and I'm taking insulin how the monitors go, how the blood sugar reacts, and if they do settle down. So this is saying 4.9, which is the real one, 5.7 on the G7, and then this has been going off low for hours, so the G6 is definitely not accurate. This is slightly higher, but you can see what's going on. I'm back home and I did have a low blood sugar. It was 4.1 on my actual monitor, and this is what the G7 has been saying, and this is what the G6 has been saying. So in my opinion so far, the G7, it was actually a bit lower before I videoed this, is more accurate. So I will show you again before bed. Hopefully I'll be out of the low blood sugar zone then. Okay, so it is nearly 11 p.m. and as you can see, both are going off the same, going low. Obviously this is saying going really, really low. It actually only alarmed now. It didn't alarm before that, so we should keep an eye on that. This has been saying I'm low all day, so I'm not that surprised. So let's check on the real blood sugar meter. So that's the G6 going off, but this is my actual meter saying 4.6. Hi Lana. So I don't know what's going on. Oh my god. Sorry, that's the G6 urgent low alarm. So I'm not too sure why both of the sensors are reading so bad. I'm just going to put it down to them being on for the first few hours today, even though it has been about 8 hours now. So I will keep an eye on my blood sugars overnight. It's kind of annoying because I don't know what my actual one is now. I was relying on the G7, but now it's doing the same as the G6 and saying I'm really, really low when I'm not. So I'll be using my actual meter for tonight, and I will show you in the morning how the trends look overnight and if I got any alarms going off in the night. Hopefully it will settle because I don't want to be waking up with all these alarms going off. So I will talk to you in the morning. Lana says good night as well. And I will tell you how my readings are then. Day 2. Good morning. So it is day 2 of testing the accuracy of the Dexcom G6 and the G7. And I had a eventful night of blood sugars, let's just say that. I'll give you a close-up of the graphs of each in a second. Right now on the G7, blood sugar is 9.7. G6 has lost signal, so we're waiting for that to come back. So it should be in a second, and we will test on the real monitor. I will talk about the trends from last night in a minute. It was very eventful, but at the moment, G7 is saying 9.2. G6 is saying 6.8, so definitely a bit off. Like, that's the difference of a correction to me. If I was 9.2, I would take 1 unit to correct. If I was 6.2, I wouldn't. So it does need to be accurate, whichever one is false. We'll see them now. 7.3, so G6, probably the more accurate one, because I would not take a correction at 7.3 either. But these two have been so different all night. So basically, I've been up all night with high blood sugars and low blood sugars. So I will show you now on the graph. If you can see there on the G7, I went super high according to the G7 overnight, and then I went low on the G6, but on here it said I stayed stable and I'm 9.2, but we know that I'm actually a bit lower than that. So the highest this went up to was actually 17, and I did check on my real monitor at the time to see was I really at 17, because that was super high for me, like the highest I've been in a long time. And I'll show you the results. So if we look at my real monitor, before bed, 6.7, 7.4, climbing up to 9. The highest I went there was 13.9, and that's when the G7 was saying I was 17. It seemed like when I was a bit higher, the G7 was more inaccurate than the G6, because the G6 was saying I was around 14, 15 at that time, even though I was 13.9, which is still kind of the same. Here's my graph here. So those peaks there were reading about 14, 15 on the G6, and that was more accurate, I think, to this. 17 was a bit higher, and right now it seems that the G6 has settled a bit and is more accurate. The G7 is a little bit off, so we will keep an eye today, because obviously yesterday the G6 was definitely going crazy, saying I was going low all day, even though I wasn't, and the G7 was more accurate. So for day 2, we'll see if the G6 has sorted itself out and the G7 is reading a bit off. It's kind of a bit alarming how different the things are, you know, at the moment compared to my real blood sugar. I'm really glad I do have my real meter. That's how I feel at the moment to check. So I'm gonna go and have breakfast anyway. Someone's looking for their breakfast here too. And I'll see. I won't do a correction, even though if I was going by the G7 I would do a correction. So I will have my breakfast, normal amount of carbs, and we will check in a while, maybe a few hours after breakfast, and see how the readers are looking, and I'll let you know if any of them alarm in between then. Right, so I'm about to go do the food shopping, and this one says 7.9 and this one says 3.9, and unfortunately I didn't bring my real one. Feel fine, so I'm gonna go average it out and say that I'm somewhere in the middle, probably like 5. And I'll check when I get home. I do have some Lift with me if I do feel bad, so I'll bring that with me into the shop. So I'm gonna go to the food shop and see when I get home, but that is so different. So this says 5.3, so I might be dropping a bit. Dexcom 2.4, so I'm feeling a bit off, so I'm gonna drink a little bit of Lift. Okay, I've come to the conclusion I'm definitely low, so I'm gonna sit in the car for a minute. 2.4 on the Dexcom G6, but this thing is saying 5.1. But I feel bad, so I'm gonna just assume I am low. Probably like 3 or 4. You know, this is really bad with the G7 because it's saying that I'm grand, but like I obviously don't feel fine now. So I do know I'm low. So I'm gonna trust the process and have my Lucozade or Lift. Sorry, I have hypo brain, so excuse me. But you know, it's saying that you're not low, which when you are, and I know I am right now, is very dangerous to be saying you're not. So, in my opinion right now, the Dexcom G6 is being better. Even if it's being overly cautious and saying I'm more low than I am, I would rather it be actually accurate in the fact that I am somewhere low, as opposed to G7 saying I'm not low at all and I'm grand. So I have to sit in the car for a while now, and then I'll go home. Okay, I'm home now. Let's do an update. So it is 3.6 on the G6 and it's 12:30. G7 6.2. I don't feel low anymore, so I'd say I'm not 3.6 anyway. 4.7. So definitely on the lower end, but I'm not hypo. I'm gonna go have a snack now. I'm just getting tired of these being really off all the time. Like 6.2, 3.6 and 4.7. I guess really this is closer. Dexcom G6 is closer today, but I'm still not low, so I don't know. Okay, so it is time for lunch, and surprise, surprise, they're reading very different. So 6.2, 10.2. Big difference. I know it's not low or high, but like to me that's the difference of a correction. I've said this before, so I think I'm going to be more like the G6. 6.8, so very accurate. What's going on here? Not accurate at all. I'm really hoping that things settle down by the end of today because I'm in work tomorrow, so I'm not going to be able to film. So I will have to either finish my accuracy day 1 and day 2 at the end of day 2, which is today, or else do day 3 on my own and just give you an update at the end of day 3. I'll see how widely off these are. On another note, I had a shower just there and I just wanted to show that they're both in place, and I really hope that the G7 starts getting more accurate. The G6 has definitely settled down, and I did say before I always had a problem with the G6 reading low when I do put it on. G7 seemed better yesterday, but today it doesn't seem so good. So okay everyone, a bit windy, but the G6 is alarming. I actually only have my phone at the moment and it says the blood sugar is 3.1 on there, so let's check the G7. 5.8. so yeah, I'd say I'm about 4, so I will try to get home while I'm still feeling okay. I don't think I am low, but I don't know. About to go to bed, and you can see this is going off urgent low, and this is saying 7.4, so there is a huge difference. So I am going to get the average and see where I actually am. I feel fine, so I think I'm alright, and I want to go to bed, and I do not want to be awake all night with this going off. 6.2, so the G7 is a bit more accurate now. I am genuinely going to have to put this in a different room because I can't be awake all night with this saying 2.9 when I'm really 6. So I'm going to take my Traceba and head to bed and work tomorrow. So far the way things have been going, as G7's accurate now, but the G6 has been more accurate today, whereas yesterday G7 was more accurate, so maybe the G7 is getting itself together. I don't know what's going on here. So I'm going to go to bed anyway. Okay, I want to go to bed and these alarms are driving me mental. So I have decided, brainwave, that I will calibrate both the G7 and the G6 because clearly they are off and after 2 days they should be aligning. This is saying 10, 4.8. I definitely am going up. We can see that, and I've just done a blood sugar as well, which was 7.8. So we're going to calibrate both of them. Now you're not really supposed to have to do this, but like I have way off readings, so I'm gonna say this one 7.8, save, and we'll see what this changes to 6.3, so more accurate. And G7, and then how do I use that as the calibration? I'll just say U 7.8. Next reading will reflect the calibration. So let's see what it's saying. I don't know. It's saying 10, so we see that the G6 did change immediately. It's saying 5.4, it's saying 10. Hopefully that will help. I need to go to bed and I want to sleep. The G6 did calibrate straight away. That is very funny, but I'm going to leave it now and take a bit of insulin before bed because I think I am going up. I'm like 7 at the moment, and go to sleep, and I will catch up with you then, and hopefully that calibration will help tomorrow.
Day 3.
Quickly before I go to work, 6.9 on the real one, 7.8 and 8.4. So doing that calibration definitely helped. We are a lot more aligned. G7 that little bit closer, but I'll keep you updated throughout the final day 3 for accuracy. Lunchtime blood sugars 7.8, 8.2, 6.9. So we are doing much better today. So I think everything is pretty accurate to the blood sugar meter. Hello everybody, so I am home from work. I did manage to give you a few little updates. Lana is excited to see me. You missed me, didn't you? Yeah. So if you hear her crying in the back, she's just excited to see me again. And she wants to go for a walk. I'm home and I managed to give you some updates throughout the day, which was good. Right now my actual blood sugar is 12.3. I did have some banana bread like half an hour ago when I came home, so that's why I don't think all my insulin has worked, but I definitely need a bit more. I've just got a high glucose alarm on the Dexcom G7 saying 12.6, so obviously that's very accurate. Meanwhile, the Dexcom G6 says 9.7. So as far as the accuracy for the two systems, I definitely needed to calibrate because both were off in their own ways. The first day, the Dexcom G6 was reading insanely low compared to the real reading and the G7, and then on the second day the G7 was reading too high, so I definitely did need that calibration. On day 1 the G6 was just reading way too low. It was just going off all day saying I was low and I wasn't, and then on day 2 the G7 was reading way too high, but you know, so both weren't doing great until I calibrated them. And I think I really needed that calibration. Dexcom do say that you don't really need to calibrate, but you can see that in some certain situations you definitely do. In terms of which I think is more accurate, it's really hard to tell at the moment. Maybe you can comment your own experience down in the comments down below. But right now the G7 seems to be accurate, but both are definitely better today. So I can't really say which until I've worn it for a longer amount of time. Maybe I'll do another video comparing the whole 10 days, but I think you definitely need to watch if you need to calibrate. So far the G7 seems to be more similar at the moment. So advantages and disadvantages of the two systems. So the biggest thing I think the G7 has going for it, well, there's two biggest things. The first one is that the sensor is actually way smaller and you don't need a transmitter. Having no transmitter is huge because you don't have to worry about having another thing to pair, making sure it's not going to expire if you're away or on holidays, and it makes it less bulky. So small here compared to this big thing here. And the other advantage I think the G7 has is the short warm-up time. Half an hour is so much better than 2 hours. 2 hours is really long, and like Libra isn't even that long. Libra is 1 hour, so G7 is definitely doing better. And also the fact that the G7 is smaller as well is definitely better. Some things the G6 then has going for it, you don't actually ever see the needle on insertion in the G6. I showed you that earlier on. So if you are kind of a bit nervous around the needles when you're putting on the sensor, maybe the G6 is better for you because you don't have to actually look at it before you put it on like you do with the G7. Another big thing the G6 has going for it is that the G6 is compatible with a lot of insulin pumps. I don't use an insulin pump, so I don't have a lot of information or knowledge around this, but as far as it goes in Ireland, now I don't know if the G7 works with insulin pumps in other countries, but in Ireland there's two pumps. There's Medtronic 780G or there's Tandem T-Slim, and the Tandem T-Slim only works with the Dexcom G6. And that's really it in Ireland for insulin pumps, to be honest. So do comment down below if there's an insulin pump that the G7 works with. But as far as it goes for now in Ireland, if you use an insulin pump like T-Slim and you want to use Dexcom, you have to have the Dexcom G6. The Dexcom G7 is not approved to work yet. Maybe that'll change in the future. I don't know. Maybe it's changed in other countries already. Let me know in the comments down below. Final things, there's definitely better things I think with the receiver on the G7, but I'm going to do a whole video about that so you can see that in more detail. And I have always struggled with the G6 reading too low when I first put it on. I'll see how my time goes with the G7 if I have that problem, but that is definitely something I have noticed, so bear that in mind. So overall, you can see that they definitely have pros and cons. You know, it depends what you're looking for really. If you have an insulin pump, you might really need the Dexcom G6. If you're like me and doing MDI, you might want the G7 because, you know, it's more hidden, there's no transmitter, and it's just a bit more modern, no really long warm-up time, things like that. In terms of which do I prefer, you know, it's really hard to pick at the moment. I thought the accuracy would be so much clearer and it's not. So I'm going to have to keep using the G7. I have some more G6s to use up first. So in future videos, you'll probably see me using a G6. You might see that because I do have a few to use up before this transmitter is dead. That's my last one. I do really like the design of the G7 and I love that there's no transmitter. But I have heard that there are problems with the G7 in terms of connections, like signal loss. Personally, haven't had that issue. I think it's more with the phone than the receiver. I'm going to be trying the phone app in future videos once I'm done with the G6, so I'll see there. And I've seen also people having problems when they travel abroad and change their G7, getting logged out of the app. So some things I'm a little bit nervous about. So I'm going to finish off my G6s for the next month and a bit, I think is what I've left. And then I'll be using the G7. But I do really like the design of it. And I think I might try it on my stomach. I did find the G6 way too bulky on the stomach. And especially when you're injecting there as well. It just didn't work for me. But the G7 might be better. So yeah, I am really excited to try out the G7. And I really hope you liked this video. I hope it gave you some insight into the G6 and the G7. And if you're thinking about picking a G7, and also I have other G7 videos, the unboxing and how to insert a G7 with more detail if you want to see those. Let me know any more videos that you want to see. I will be doing a receiver comparison video in the future sometime, but I'm not sure when. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do, please give it a big thumbs up, comment down below and subscribe if you're new to the channel. And I will see you all in the next video.